Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to our panel on the evolution of Azeroth. I'm Randy Jordan, a community manager with the Warcraft team. I started playing World of Warcraft 20 years ago, and I joined Blizzard 6 years after that. I want you to meet my coworkers, starting with Paul.
You start with me. My name is Paul Kubit. Nice to meet everybody. I am an associate game director on World of Warcraft, working on the Midnight expansion. You can see a younger picture of me right behind me here.
There you go.
Yes. So due to the fact that I've been working on this game for close to 20 years now, I started in 2006. Hope you can all hear me. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. All right. Perfect.
Yeah, you just got to touch it. Just gotta look.
Yeah, been working on the game since roughly when we were working on Encourage. I started in game testing as a QA tester and worked my way onto quest design. Did that for a long time, worked on all parts of the game, and now, yeah, working on making cool stuff at Midnight. Yeah, nice to meet you.
I'll jump right in next. Hey, everybody. My name is Jeremy Feasel. I haven't been here for the 20 years that Paul has. I just celebrated my 15-year anniversary at World of Warcraft, and I got my cool little blue ring. I had originally started as an encounter designer. One of the first things I made was the crazy boss fight List Resort, which was modeled after a lot of fun SNES flying games. I have done many fun things since then. After that, I went on to my favorite thing, which was anything fuzzy and cute. I worked on battle pets for a really long time. I worked on hunter pets. I worked on mounts. I added a couple of secrets to the game, and nowadays I help head up the live services vertical on WoW. We add a lot of the stuff that's in the patches between the patches.
The patches between the patches. Hi, Maria.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well.
Great. Hi, I'm Maria Hamilton. I'm the Associate Design Director on WoW. I actually played early on in the beta, so I've played the whole time. I love the game. And I've only been with the team for a little over 5 years. I just got my sword, in fact. So they do arm us at 5 years, which is nice. We get mugs earlier on for the, well, anyway. I started off on the quest team, and I made a variety of different quests. But one of my favorite things I made was Dead Blanchie, the mount. I had a lot of fun thinking through how that would play out and work and make sense. And I'm responsible for sort of the world, what we do in the world, the quests, the narrative, and sort of how everything plays out in our expansions.
That leaves me.
Yeah.
My name is Jesse Kurlanchik. I'm not an associate. I am not a director. I am one of the principal designers on WoW, and I lead up housing. I have... I've only been on the WoW team for 3 years, but I played WoW longer than anybody up here, since the technical friends and family alpha. I used to be very, very hardcore. Now I'm very dad, and so.
All right. So let's go back to the beginning. Thinking back on the beginnings of World of Warcraft in 2004, how did the development team envision the living world of Azeroth growing and evolving?
Yeah, I could take this. So we've been thinking about Azeroth as a living world for since the beginning, and a living world can kind of mean a lot of different things. I think first it means the world is changing, and that can be from a minute to minute, hour to hour basis when you're looking at things that were in the very first version of the game, like rare mobs or treasure chests, variation in the space that it wasn't always predictable. Day to day, the mere existence of a day-night cycle sort of makes the world feel a little bit more alive when you log in Elwyn at nighttime, and it's darker than when you were in earlier that day. It feels alive. And then, of course, the game can vary from week to week, month to month, year to year, as we go through the seasons, and we have things like world events and holidays. We had a team at the very beginning called the World Events team, which is just a group of 3 intrepid designers who were entirely in charge of building things like holidays. They built all the first Winter Veil and Hallow's End and things like that, moving on to Brewfest later on in Burning Crusade and so on. But also just populating the cities and the spaces and making it feel like the world was alive. So that's sort of like the first way that the world is a living world. Second is how it's sort of evolving and the story progresses over time. In that first, before we got to BC, I think we had 13 patches. It got to like 1.13. There was all sorts of things, just like the story advancing over time with the addition of things like new dungeons, new adventuring areas, new quest lines, raids, all getting added in over time, sort of figuring out how we were going to progress the story. And of course, that continued into later expansions as the story moved further and further. And last is just having players in the world and the gameplay changing. The mere existence of y'all, if you play World of Warcraft, makes the world, sort of vibrant and variant from, play session to play session and day to day.
I think even more again, you all have changed in the past 20 years. We used to be on Ventrilo and TeamSpeak. Now we're on Discord. We used to be on the forums. Now we're on Discord. Twitch wasn't a thing. YouTube was barely a thing. And so the way people play WoW has changed pretty drastically over the past 20 years as well.
You have all sorts of things that come along that are instigated by the players. So, for example, I like to think back on the Terran Mill versus South Shore battles that would take place over and over for months in some cases. And I always wonder, where was the development team's head at with that? Was that a surprise? Was it something that really gave the team a different look at how the game was going?
I like to say that this was intentional, and it very well might have been early on that someone decided that the positioning of Terran Mill and South Shore, these two Horde and then Alliance places, were perfectly positioned for world PvP to occur. But I got to imagine this was mostly emergent, that players were sort of discovering that this was a fun place to fight in general, and they found other places in Stranglethorn Vale and elsewhere where you could just sort of have fun interactions with one another. And that sort of emergent gameplay are things that we play off of in later designs when we build versions of Terran Mill and South Shore to in Cataclysm and beyond to even further encourage things like that and to build future PvP. PvP is a space where we do a lot of ideation based on the way that we see people interacting and players interacting in the real world. Or not the real world, but the outdoor world. It feels like the real world sometimes.
My memory of the Encourage event for me and my guild was one of being on a boat in Menethil Harbor for the entire event. And I recognize now that gave the design team something to chew on and something to improve against.
So were you on a boat because you were trying to get there or because you were trying to stay as far away from the ruckus as possible?
I actually wanted to be there. I wasn't very lucky.
Yeah. So the Encourage event was sort of the culmination of us, again, building and trying to build a living world, a space where it felt like, the players were working together, acting together, this enormous war event. For those of you who weren't there or aren't familiar, this was an event where huge groups of players were gathering wolf pelts, and the Alliance needed Peace Bloom, and the Horde needed this, and we would all gather materials together, and then groups would choose champions, and you'd go through a difficult series of quests before one person on every server could ring the gong to open up this raid for their server, and it was this sort of huge epic moment that's really defined a lot of the way that we've designed public events later, and really been instrumental in figuring out, how we can build this living world. It didn't come without consequences, as Randy said. He was stuck on a boat because it was a lot of these events had brought so many players that it just brought the server to its knees. But I think we've learned lessons over then. I mean, we have since repeated this in WoW Cataclysm, in WoW Classic to greater success in terms of we were able to get more players in, and the servers were not brought to their knees quite, at least to the level that they were in the first iteration. And of course, we have tools like, just better server engineering in general and lessons we've learned, but also things like sharding to be able to make sure that when player populations do get to a point where there's so many people that you're not having a fun experience anymore, then we can split them out into two, and then everybody continues to have fun.
So at some point after the launch of original WoW, the team starts working on the first expansion. Tell me from a design standpoint, what does that mean in terms of getting to do some things that maybe you didn't get to do originally, or build on some things that you learned about after the launch of original WoW.
Yeah, so for, did I lose sound again? Test one.
There you go.
Okay. I'll sit forward like this, and then hopefully it won't happen again. Early on, when we're making BC, we sort of discovered that players were identifying in sort of different groups. The WoW player base is not monolithic. There are people who enjoy raiding. There are people who enjoy PvP. There are people who enjoy questing. Of course, there's people who enjoy everything, but that is not true of every single person, and some groups might prefer one thing over the other. For those who like questing, like myself included, Dad Mode Jesse now included as well, that you could run out of quests in Classic. It was sort of, you could complete everything, and then if you wanted to do sort of solo gameplay at that point, well, you were sort of limited to like professions. Gathering is something you could do, but there wasn't a whole lot repeatable. So Enter Daily Quest is sort of our first stab at building a questing game to satisfy that sort of player mindset who wants to just do questing, but you will never run out of. And so we started with the Ogres of Ogrila. We had the Arakoa of Skedis as these areas. The Ethereals are also in Blades Edge Mountains. And built daily quests for them so that you could come back day after day and continue to play questing. This was also done in a way that we wanted to make sure that the world felt alive. It wasn't static, that at least we would rotate through different quests on a daily basis so you wouldn't know quite what to expect. As you climbed the ranks, not only would you have new quests available to you from those ogres of Ogrila, but also they might refer to you a little bit more reverentially as you became revered and exalted and so on. We also started learning lessons at this point on what it meant to build repeatable content like this. One of my favorite stories, I was working at, you heard me mention, I worked in QA at the time, dealing with bugs. And we started to deal with new types of bugs that had to do with people running the same quest multiple times in a row. In Blades Edge Mountains, some of you oldies like us might remember there was a quest where it was a bombing run quest, but it was sort of different than ones you do now, where you had to bomb a couple Legion cannons and things like that, and piles of munitions in the areas of Blades Edge Mountains. And the cannons would fire back at you. The bug we found was that those areas would get really laggy on Sunday and Monday, and the first week we weren't sure exactly why. And then it happened again the next Sunday and Monday, and the reason why is because anytime one of those things shot a bullet at you, it would summon a little invisible creature. We call it a bunny up in the sky, and they weren't despawning. And so after so many people ran this quest, day after day, the sky would get full of bunnies, and there'd be 100,000 bunnies in there, and again, servers brought to their knees. We fixed that, but this was sort of the types of lessons we were learning as we were building a living world and building this new type of content, which didn't exist in Classic. We didn't have that type of bug.
I got to be king of the ogres. Thank you very much. Thank you. I also really, really enjoyed the Netherwing Ledge. More than just having the boomerang and beating on peons, there was such a sense of reaching a goal, and that goal was a flying mount. And of course, flying was the big step at this point in WoW. The big step forward for gameplay was being able to get on your mount and fly. Did you fly, Jesse?
Absolutely. I was the first person on my server to fly.
You were the first
Because
flyer?
again, hardcore as a child.
Right on.
In my 20s. No, I think flying, as a player back then, was groundbreaking. There was not the norm that you could fly in an RPG, that you could fly over places that you had previously only seen from the ground. I don't envy the artists and world builders who had to go in and make it so that things had textures on their tops.
So we didn't used to build the tops of buildings until you could fly.
Or the content designers who had to now fill in space with the expectation that players are just going to, I'm just going to leapfrog that. I have no interest. But it was fantastic. I think as a player, seeing the world from that view really gave me this sense of awe and inspiration, and wanted to explore over and over and over again.
Right on. So, going into Wrath of the Lich King, we now have a sense that this game receives expansions. It is going to continue to grow and evolve for who knows how long. Tell us a little bit about what it was like finding new things to implement to the game, and realizing how new technologies would allow us to do more in WoW.
So back after we had built Classic and Burning Crusade, I think one of the things we self-reflected on the most is the world didn't change with you, that you could do these awesome things, kill dragons, unite peoples and whatnot, but the world always stayed static. And that was necessary because everybody's living in the same world, and the world can't change for you but not for them. So we wanted to build tech to be able to do that, and we built something called phasing. Which is something which, if you're not familiar, I think a lot of you, if you've played World of Warcraft, might be. But this is basically one player can do something, and then the world will change. As part of a storyline, Booty Bay might come under siege by pirates, and that player sees Booty Bay under siege by pirates. But other people who haven't completed that storyline don't. And this is a really useful technology, but it's also it's something we actually continue to work with today, and have developed better tech for in later expansions.
Yeah, we use phasing an awful lot because it's really effective for showing progression, individual player progression, as well as times when we're using a big group thing that's happening and we want you to see a specific thing. So it controls the visibility of what you can see. But it has some issues with it also that we have to consider when we're designing, because unfortunately you might not see your friend, and so you said, hey, I'll meet you at the such and such place, and then your friend, you don't see them, and they don't see the same thing you see. So when you say, oh, I'm standing over by the big ogre, they say, what big ogre? So one of the downsides of phasing is that it separates people. It makes it such that it may look like some place is empty when it's actually full of other people, but they're in another phase. So now we're very careful when we phase, when we choose to phase, and also we have implemented party sync. If you're not familiar with it or you haven't tried it, you want to help your friend who's maybe behind you in the story, you party sync up, and now you'll see the same things that they're seeing. So very, very useful tool, but also can be detrimental to that feeling of being in a world if you're too separated from other people.
Yeah, I'll say we phased a lot of that when it came out in Lich King, because it was a new tool and we were figuring it out. And then as we sort of progressed, realized that phasing is a story sledgehammer. It is super powerful for telling story, having the world change around you, but that doesn't come without consequences. And this has been sort of a repeated pattern, I think, as you see designers on the team excited about new technology, and they implement it in the first, sometimes a scrappy way, and then we'll iterate it over time.
Gave us the water slide in Grizzly Hills.
That's right. Yeah.
What could be better? So the biggest phasing that I can think of that came along was actually done by Deathwing himself.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
A major change to the landscape. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think this is continuing this line of thought. If we want to see the world changing, the big idea for Cataclysm was, what if we changed everything? What if when Deathwing came out of the earth, it changed so much that entire quest lines changed, entire zones changed. The tops of the mountains in Badlands are sheared off, and the Barrens is split into two with a big river of lava in the middle, and so on. And along with that, the quest lines changed. If you go to a lot of those Cataclysm-affected zones, you'll see the story is Deathwing just came out of the earth. We learned a lot of lessons in doing that. One, it was a lot of work to do to rebuild all those zones, and a lot of them were done really quickly. Again, I mentioned scrappily before. We did built those zones really quickly, but also some players weren't as happy about the changes. The changes we'd made to zones were done with good intentions of looking at classic quest lines and saying these don't really match our philosophies anymore. Sometimes a quest might send you all the way to another zone, and then you come back, and then you get 15 silver and nothing else, and that's it. And so we wanted to build quests that are more in the at the time the modern sensibility of let's build these into campaigns, into storylines that have beginnings, middles, and ends. And you see that with the Cataclysm-affected zones. For players who were disappointed by that and saw that, I kind of can't go back to before, I can't play the Classic as I remember, I think this was one of those instigating moments which ended up having us make WoW Classic. So you can go back and you can play WoW Classic in the way that you remember it. And a lot of players, I'm sure many of yourselves included, do prefer to play that way, and it's great that you can.
It seems like Mists of Pandaria is also a little reflective of what you were just talking about. There's a condensation of everything. When you talk to players about their memories of Mists of Pandaria, it's very cozy, it's very tight-knit, and that feels to me like that was the intention of the design team. What do you think?
I totally agree. Yeah, I would say that Mists is sort of where things started to coalesce a little bit. That they started to like, we started playing with the tools that we had been working with the daily quests and weeklies and phasing and learning those lessons, taking the big experiments and building them a little bit more in a considered way. That living world of Mists of Pandaria really felt like it was there. That the daily quests that you were doing weren't always going to the same place, but you could be going to the Celestial Temple in the north one day and the south the other day, or you could be helping out the Shadow Pen with something based on your actual, playing your class and fighting. But another time you might be helping the Anglers or the Tillers of Half Hill and like doing something which is a little bit more domestic. Maybe that's sort of the early stages of what ended up becoming housing, or at least those that style of playing WoW. I could very much see a connection from that to what we're looking at doing in Midnight.
The farm is one of the greatest things that's ever been in WoW. That's what I'm saying. The farm was simply awesome.
Yeah.
So this takes us to one of the biggest steps that WoW ever took in Legion. The updates to world content and endgame content. With these things, new life was breathed into this world. What was the development approach going into Legion?
So, like Paul was mentioning, I think by the time we got to Mists of Pandaria, it was feeling like we had a really well-polished version of a lot of the core elements of World of Warcraft. You had cool rare spawns popping up, you had fun dungeons and raids, you had the introduction of challenge mode to help continue to challenge that audience, so the team is still experimenting and doing fun stuff in that space. You have the cozy farm, like you mentioned. We have also gone back to, as we developed future expansions, the original design documents for the reputations of Mists of Pandaria. Really? Because it had one of the coolest breakdowns originally prior to any work being done of how the reputation, what their vibe would be, what they would be all about. So you'd have this cool, what was now kind of an ancient Microsoft Word document with weird formatting that was like the Tillers, and they're all about these particular professions, and this is what their whole vibe is, and here's where they live. And when we went back in future expansions like Dragonflight, that was one of the things we looked back on, was that document when we were designing Renown. So if you consider MOP kind of the end of Era 1, where a lot of that core WoW stuff is feeling pretty good and pretty polished, the next step for us was look across the whole world and see what other new potential areas do we have to explore. What other experiments can we do? One of those areas was, like you mentioned, was world quests. We wanted to get out of that space of everything is on specific timers and has specific rewards, and it's always the same, because that was starting to feel like, hey, it's always feeling daily, it's always feeling weekly, it's starting to feel a little bit like a chore. What if, instead, the world itself started to populate a lot of the content? And not only that, but then the reputation and the rewards would be slightly different on a weekly basis. And let's get out of the space of things happening every day and instead have things happen every 4 hours and 6 hours and 3.5 days, and really kind of mess with expectations in a way that made the world really feel significantly more alive. And then you start layering all of the many systems of Legion on top of that, and how they can add a little bit of that randomness and a little bit of that spice to your day. For example, adding the emissary system, where you not only could do a whole bunch of world quests and get an awesome reward and potentially get a legendary from it as well, and that would completely change up what your week was going to be like. But also, we came up with this concept that we were calling capacitance at the time, where you didn't have to log in and do all of your emissaries every time they were up, or all of your world quests every time they were up. They would start to build up over time, which is another way for us to make it feel like, hey, the world is changing when you're not there, so that when you log in, it's going to feel significantly different. And then, of course, the team, throughout this time is also experimenting with tons of new content. This was our first time really taking our foray into special secret content and having this extra layer of what was, we tried to make undata mineable, and that was a real back and forth with the community for quite some time. But exactly how do we hide secret content when they know everything about our game? But with all the secrets of Azeroth that we included in, like the Lucid Nightmare puzzle or the Kazumoth the Hungering.
Yes. What was the first secret?
The very first secret? Well, the very first secret we did in kind of the modern Legion era. This might have actually preceded Legion. It had this idea for, what if we just hid something? Something off in some corner, right?
Okay.
So we added this little Murloc egg, which was in Northrend. and it's in a cave.
I remember. It's like you have to go out in the ocean.
You have to go
south
out of the ocean.
Northrend.
Nobody would go out there. So my thought process at the time was like, yeah, just stick this in. Like, it's cool. Like, nobody will know there's this thing out there. If you go to the pet journal, it says this exists. And that started, you know, the forum threads that were like, does anybody know where to get this pet? This seems like a cool pet. It's a murloc. And the community found it. And then there was this neat article about it. And then there was forum posts about it. And suddenly there's this interest in, hey, the devs are actually able to add stuff we don't know about. And then, of course, that got me thinking, like, yeah, well, neat. Like, how do I do more of this?
A couple of months ago, I was asked to summarize the WoW community on Discord. And it was so fun to go look at the different Discords. And the secret finding Discord is huge. And they're so energetic. And they're having so much, even when they're not working on a secret, they're having so much fun. Something else in Legion, which I feel like ties back to this personal, cozy approach, like we saw in the Half Hill Farm, class halls. The team somehow made a dozen class halls, and they were different. They weren't just you know, the same thing for a different class with some different colors. Tell me about that.
You say somehow, and that's good production processing. That is how.
From my perspective, it looks like magic.
That's how you make 30+ artifact lines at the same time, too.
30+.
Well, I think you know that gets back to what Paul was talking about how to make the world feel like it's a living space, right? And there's a couple of different ways I think that Artifact accomplished that. One of them was we couldn't cram all the Artifact quest lines just into the Broken Isles because there was a lot of Artifact quest lines, and somebody would have had their Artifact quest line just hanging out with murlocs up in a corner. Like, there just wasn't enough space. So the team had this idea of like, hey, let's go back to all of these older spaces in World of Warcraft and not cataclysm them all, but revisit some of the storylines of things like Subchapel and some of our favorite characters back then. And this is sort of a new way for the team to think about reusing a lot of those older spaces in a new way that told the next chapter of their storyline. And that changed up dozens of the areas of older World of Warcraft. But then, like you mentioned, there's also the idea that, hey, we're going more in depth into what your class is and who they hang out with and who their minions are and what their whole vibe is. And you know, the class halls, I think, accomplished that really well in a way that we hadn't ever gone into in World of Warcraft before. You had some class quests prior to this, but there really was no idea of this is your space and you're going to hang out with other mages and you're going to do mage stuff. I play a mage. So, and that's going to be cool and awesome. You're going to get a special set for it, and you're going to get your own minions for it and everything. Like, we really went deep into that lore of each individual class that I think it helped make each class feel deeper in the overall world as well.
It made the world feel more alive, too, because like if you were a mage and you saw someone else was doing other priest stuff and someone else is doing other warrior stuff, it makes the world feel bigger. It makes the world feel like it's not just on rails for everybody, but you have your own adventure that you're going on through.
And you didn't get to do that stuff. You got to see somebody else doing something crazy and being like, what are they doing? Now I want to play a warlock.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are you in Deadwind Pass?
I never thought of playing a warrior until I saw how they exited their class hall. That's very, very exciting. And I got a fishing pole.
The Underlight Angler, that's right.
Yes. Who do I have to thank for that?
The professions team.
Okay, we'll say the professions team.
Yes.
But it's just a very interesting thing that it wasn't a conclusion. When the artifacts were all made and working and implemented, that we could still do something more. Have that artifact fishing pole and give players a reason to come together so much as they did in Legion. So now that we've had some time to reflect on it, Dragonflight really represents a major turning point for World of Warcraft. Tell us about some of the big additions in Dragonflight.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to speak about Dragonflight. I quite love it. So we were given enormous maps. So the world building team just made these massive, massive maps for us. And it fit really well with our themes, which was primarily about discovery and exploration. We're returning to the homeland of the dragons. We need to look everywhere and find all the things. And this led us to this decision to build a lot of smaller activities that you could find in nooks and crannies. We hid things everywhere. So those could be things like you fly to the super high peak and plant a banner for the Dragon Scale expedition. Or you see some loose dirt, and so you use a shovel and dig there, and oh, you got something cool. So small things like that, but bigger things too. For example, you could go hunting with the centaur of the Onaran Plains and sort of see what their culture was and learn more about how they valued their hunting dogs and their hunting hawks, right? But the one that most people talk about most of the time, of course, is making soup with the Tuskar. And I'm gonna turn that over to the chef here, and he can explain what he did.
Well, first, can I get a yes, chef, from the audience? Yes! All right, thank you. So I was lucky to be asked to work on the folks who were building the community feast event, which is what we sort of call Tuskar Soup informally. The directions here was, we'd been working with the culture of the Askara for a while, or the team who'd been building the story of the Azure Span had, and they had an idea of what the fantasy was here. They said, we want a big event where you make soup. And we had a couple early designs, but like the idea we got most excited about was this character who sat at the pot and was giving everybody different directions of, you go get salt, and you go get one kind of fish, and you get another kind of fish, and you come over here and help stir the pot. And the way we were able to implement that was with scenarios. Scenarios is some tech that we have to sort of tell a shared story in the outdoor world. Usually it's sort of a long linear story or a multi-stage linear story. But again, being scrappy and using the tools that we had available, we said, what if we made 60 different scenarios though? And then the fish one was one scenario, and this fish one was a different one, and stirring the pot was a third. And then some scripts behind the scene were saying, okay, make sure we don't give two people the same one and mix it around. And it worked, and it was fun. It was a different sort of way of playing. It was a little bit hectic, and players were encouraged to have big groups, because the bigger group that you had, the better the soup was, the closer it got to getting to legendary quality. Of course, that also came with like a couple early bugs we worked out early on, but that sort of proof of concept was something we built later on into scenarios where we can make multi-step scenarios, which is one single scenario which can have different people on different steps, and that's tech that we used for later iterations of the same style of gameplay, like you see in Time Rifts or in the theater troupe that's currently going on in Isla Dorn right now.
Yeah, I went and got my supervisor title right away. That was really important to me that I had supervisor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, with these giant maps, it seemed important to us that we do some stuff with flying. So we brought about the dynamic flight, then called dragon riding, now called sky riding. And this gave us the ability to add momentum and moment-to-moment gameplay to traversing our world, which was quite large. And so that extra speed was very useful, very helpful to players as they were exploring the nooks and crannies and trying to find the cool secrets that were hidden. And there were some things to learn there too, of course. Some players, turns out, get sick if they have to deal with momentum. The motion sickness was problematic for a number of our players, so we looked at accessibility options. We're trying really hard to look at accessibility and make sure that all the players can play. So our first effort was, of course, you could ride along with a friend. You could just be a cute little hatchling, and you would fly along with your friend. You didn't even have to look. And that way there was none of that going on, right? Also in questing, we had quests where we needed you to maneuver in particular ways that might make you ill, and so we had alternate versions where you could say, you know what, why don't you do the flying for me, and I'm just gonna, step away for a minute or something. So we were looking at that as well. But this ability to build quests with this flight method in mind meant that we could end objectives way up high, and then you would have this amazing swoop as you went to the next objective. It meant that we knew that you wouldn't necessarily, battle things in between, so we had to make sure that when you arrived at your next destination, there was something cool to do there. You weren't essentially skipping the content. But it also let us make new kinds of quests, quests where you could do the races and go on a crazy race through the sky and try to beat the timer, and we could do ones where you banged into things, and we could move it into dungeons. We could use it in raids. So it was a new opportunity for us, a new type of quest, in addition to just being really fun. And since you talked about flying before, why don't you tell me about how it felt now?
I'd love to tell you how I feel about flying. No, I think it per the panel, evolved your relationship to the world in a very unexpected way. jumping off Valdrakken and soaring down the side of a cliff, hitting the river, and then just skimming off of it, going through the canyons, was really invigorating. But at the same time, it was very, very peaceful. I was like in the world. The wind is going by my hair, and I got to appreciate once again a different view of Azeroth. Being able to feel that way about a game, I think is really why we play and make games. Get emotional as I talk about it. No, I think it was a fantastic addition.
I want to throw in, this sort of changed the way that I play zones now as well. Before, I'm a quester. I love playing through the questing story, but now that we have those skywriting glyphs, anytime I get to a new zone, I got to imagine I'm not the only one. The first thing I do is I got to go explore this whole place and see if I can find all these things, and then I'll go to the story afterwards. But it sort of changes your relationship with the world.
How did skywriting affect secret building?
Well, secret building has always been about the best way to hide things in plain sight. So it certainly made it faster for the community to get from point A to point B around the world. But many secrets are 5 or 6 layers deeper than just getting between point A and point B right now. That was the original design with some of those original Chronicle secrets, though, was the idea that, hey, it would be difficult for the community to find these things that are hidden in 6 spots around 20 years of game world. When you have a community that large looking for secrets, it is not difficult.
Sure, but did you ever get the sense that a secret was a little too secret?
I think if there was one that was a little bit too hard, it was probably the Jennifer secret, because the mental leap you had to take between what was shown in-game and the puzzle in the head of the designer was enough to keep them busy for 11 months.
11 months?
11 months.
I don't remember it being that long. Wow.
So less than a year.
Yeah,
They made
That's
it.
pretty good.
That's great. So I want to talk a little bit about roadmaps, because as both a player and part of a communications team, roadmaps really help me. They speak to me. From a design perspective, what do roadmaps allow us to do? This is the time frame when we're starting to be able to really predict for the players what's coming over the next year.
Yeah, I can actually hear the emotion in your voice as a community manager liking roadmaps.
Yes, I do.
Well, of course, we committed to a cadence, and we committed to specific things happening in those cadence, at that cadence, sorry. And by presenting this, we gave hints and tips, allowed for a lot of speculation. But what we promised was that we would deliver in a steady way, right? It was a predictable release, steady way, on PTR, when expected. And I'm very proud that we've held to that. We've hit it every time. So super proud of us for that. For the story, it's been wonderful. I too am a fan, because it allows us to plot out and figure out what's going to happen. So for something like the World Soul Saga, where we have a lot of story to tell over a lengthy period of time, we can build out. We actually have a Miro, which is a tool we use to basically map out everything and move things around. And it's like, who's going to die next? And this is great, right? I'm going to have a good time with this. No, we don't do the dying. Well, we do the dying a little, but yeah. So we can move things around, figure out like what we want to have happen where and why and how that all ties into the story. It gives us great opportunity to pace things and ramp things up. We get to make prologues for things and epilogues for other things. The Kirin Tor epilogue, for example, we were really looking forward to getting in there. So this steady cadence helps us as well, because it helps us think through very carefully where we want to place things. And yeah, I like it too.
Good. Anything else on that?
Yeah, no, yep, we're good.
Probably the biggest turning point in the history of WoW was when Chris Metzen at BlizzCon 2023 announced the World Soul Saga. Take me back to the concepting and the iteration that led up to that.
Yeah, I think Chris has mentioned it before, but essentially we were working on ideas for the expansion, the expansion that was coming after Dragonflight, and we had a big story in mind, and his thinking was, it's just too big. It's never going to fit in one expansion. Let's really bring back all the people they expect to see. It's the 20th anniversary. We got to knock it out of the park. Let's do a trilogy. And we all went, a trilogy? Huh. All right. Let's see what that looks like. And like I said, we pulled out our sharing tool and started putting stickies all over and went, oh, yeah, this could work. This will be good. Yeah, we can bring back all sorts of people. Spoilers-ish.
Yes, please.
And we can really build this up into something to celebrate. This bringing the final sort of like what happens with all of these people's threads and what's going on, and just really, doing the 20 years justice. So it was initially a little bit like, ooh, that sounds like a lot. But then, yeah, I mean, we're working on all three of them simultaneously. We have teams working on all of them. And I just played through second passes of the campaign for Midnight, so we're doing great, which is cool. So a ways to go yet, I'm afraid, but
still a long way to go. Yeah, one of the cool things about working in a trilogy like this, though, is typically we've told encapsulated stories within the scope of an expansion, which is a number 0.0, number 0.1, number 0.2, and it sort of has a beginning, middle, and end. This has a lot more. There's a lot more places where you can put story, and it means we get to go to a lot more interesting places. We get to go to unexpected places. The very first diversion off of the Isle of Dorn and it's Khazalgar, et cetera, was to go to Undermine, and it's exciting to think about where we're going to go next as the story's kind of dealing around the Void and the World Soul and everything continues to unfold.
And during this development of the World Soul Saga, the team has also been producing entirely new ways to get into the living world. What does WoW Remix Mists of Pandaria mean for you?
Well, I mean, to the point that Maria was making about how the roadmap and having this consistent content cadence gives us great opportunities for adding a ton of new story content. Hey, it also gives us great opportunities for adding a ton of new interesting experiments, which we did all throughout Dragonflight. Everything from the revamped Secrets of Azeroth to the follower dungeons. Those were all little experiments that we were doing. And at the end of Dragonflight, we knew we wanted to take a couple of big swings on the experimental side of things. One of them was experimenting with reusing WoW content. And this was really, like, MOP Remix was really the combination of two different separate ideas that came together like a delicious cookie. One of them was, hey, can we expand upon time walking? At the time, we were doing things like turbulent timeways for the first time and finding that to be something that people were really enjoying. And we've continued updating turbulent timeways ever since then. But then we were asking ourselves, what is the most effective way to relive, say, a whole zone? Should we do zone walking? Or a whole expansion if you went even bigger than that? Meanwhile, a bunch of our team members were playing our sister game, Diablo 3, and we're doing a bunch of the Diablo 3 seasonal content, and we're saying, hey, can we get something like this Diablo 3 seasons in WoW? Something where I feel like I'm going through similar content, but with wildly different gameplay and a wildly different leveling scheme, and I'm really enjoying leveling up my character in this newest season. So as both of those ideas continued being iterated on in big whiteboards, as you mentioned, eventually they just kind of merged together into this great thing that ended up being MOP Remix. Let's go back to Mists of Pandaria, and we actually went and looked at a bunch of data, and we saw that a bunch of people hadn't even done Pandaria that were currently playing WoW, so it was also a great opportunity just to get people back to a space that they had, not even back to a space, to get people for the first time to a space that they hadn't done yet, because maybe a bunch of them had leveled up in Dragonflight. But then also, could we reuse this content in a way that felt different while I was leveling through it? So, and that was the impetus behind all the different itemization, the infinite Dragonflight, all the different layers on the content, the new ways to acquire the loot that you got from MOP Remix. You can see some of the interesting factoids up here. Some of our favorite leveling classes there were the Death Knight and Priest, and of course Hunter and Paladin, because everybody likes playing Hunter and Paladin. A bunch of people made it all the way to the very end and managed to kill a mythic Garrosh. We felt that MOP Remix was a really great experiment. It was a great opportunity to reuse the older game in WoW, but also give people a chance to do it fresh. And I feel like one of the key parts about freshening up a piece of content like this that we learned was that it's really the most fun when everybody gets to experience it together. And that's what a remix does. It's not just turning on everything all at the same time and saying, hey, go have fun. It's, hey, we're going to go through this together again. So it feels like it's a new expansion. And it feels like you're progressing with your friends again, and you're all learning about what the most overpowered item combinations are and finding these new secrets in the game about where did they put the special drops and stuff like that. It's a great learning experience for us, but also we got a huge amount of positive feedback from the community that they would love to see another remix at some point in the future.
Are we ready to talk publicly about some more remix?
This was going to be a fun panel regardless, but I think it will be an even more fun panel if we get to release a couple of juicy tidbits of information, maybe?
Go ahead. Hit us.
So, as many of you have surmised, perhaps because we gave out a couple of hints, or very large hints, that we are going to do another remix. And the next remix we are going to is, of course, the fan favorite expansion, Legion. Now, like we mentioned earlier, Legion has a lot of content. It has way more content than Mists of Pandaria, and it has a huge amount of different systems. So the team is currently hard at work delving deep into how we are going to integrate all of these systems in a remixed way. Which systems are we going to remix? Which systems are we going to remix and add new things to? Which of all of the different drops that came from all over the place in Legion are going to be accessible via currency? Team is delving into those right now, and we will have a significantly larger info dump later that includes a lot of the details about the systems, but we don't want to leave you without at least a couple of interesting, juicy tidbits about the stuff that we're exploring and we're excited about. So here's two of them. First, Legion is where we first introduced the Mythic Keystone system. And this gives us a great opportunity to expand upon the audiences that we hit with MOP Remix by giving the Mythic Plus audience something to do in a remix space. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could do Mythic Keystones with the wild item scaling of Remix and see how high you can go? We think that would be cool.
Yes.
And we're really excited about folks getting a chance to do that and just figuring out how to completely break that game. We completely expect you're going to do that, and we hope you have a ton of fun.
Right on.
But some of us in dad mode prefer the outdoor world. So one of the other things we're actually really excited about that we can do in a closed system like a remix is try wild experiments with the outdoor world. So we're excited to let y'all know we are taking yet another page from our friends over there on Diablo, and we're going to try adding a increased difficulty world tier in Legion Remix. It's currently called the Shattered Timeline. It's a timeline where everything went worse and everybody is significantly more difficult. So if you would like to challenge yourself while you are leveling up or at max level and doing Legion World Quests, head over to the Shattered Timeline and let us know what you think.
Right on. Remix isn't the only experimental game mode that we've seen in recent years. There was also something called Plunder Storm. What was that?
So again, at the very end of Dragonflight, we wanted to take some really big experimental swings, and what could be a larger experiment than not only a game mode in World of Warcraft that didn't use your World of Warcraft character and used a completely new action combat-like system, and you were a pirate, and you entered it through a whole separate screen, it had all of its own rewards, and also, it was a battle royale. I don't think anybody was expecting the World of Warcraft team to come out with a battle royale at the end of Dragonflight. And despite the fact that it maybe did not have the largest Venn diagram overlap with what surveys have told us our players largely play outside of World of Warcraft, we saw a huge number of players jump in to play Plunder Storm. You can see some of the stats up here. The highest amount of plunder that was earned by a single player was 3.4 million. At least 4 people died to campfires. We have a lot of interesting statistics from Plunder Storm. And despite the fact that it was wildly different than WoW and completely outside the norm of World of Warcraft content, we saw tons and tons and tons of players jump in and play it, and we would consider it a huge success. And what that tells us is that there's a desire from the player base to do cool game modes in WoW, and that maybe we should start to think of another one.
Jeremy Feasel. Can we confirm, maybe we can't get details right now, but can we confirm that we are working on the next fantastic experience?
We can, in fact, confirm that we are working on yet another game mode for World of Warcraft. But we are going to provide even less details because we would like that to be a reveal that includes probably a lot of cool videos that get across everything we're trying to do here. But to give you a couple of juicy tidbits on this one, it has a vibe that is a little bit on the scary story side of things, and it is not a battle royale.
Okay. Okay, so we have 2 clues. Scary, not battle royale. Thank you. That's
All right.
Speculate
Narrows it
away,
down.
and we would love to hear what you think.
Thank you. So in my experience with this WoW community, there has never been anything that was more beloved and more requested than housing. Housing feels like the culmination of a question this community has been asking since the beginning of WoW. Tell me, Jesse, how did the team get started on housing?
So housing has been worked on WoW for, I don't know, years and years and years and years. You can find old remnants of data mined houses and, you know, really crufty stuff going way, way back.
Cruft.
Lots of cruft.
Great word.
But the sort of the more modern, you know, attempt at housing started years before I got here. And a team had been prototyping and sort of pitching and building towards it. And they had a bunch of really compelling sort of prototypes and things that we were iterating on. I joined the team, started working on housing, started working on even more prototypes for housing because we were sort of very keen on dialing in a couple things. And so now we're here. We have a pretty big team working on housing. Everybody is super excited about it on the team. Apparently, folks are as well. And in the evolving of Azeroth, y'all have been playing for, in some cases, 20 years. But our character's been visiting Azeroth. You know, we come, we stay in an inn, we log off, and then we're gone. Now you have a home. You have your own little slice of Azeroth that you can make your own. You can make a spooky house. You can make a scary house. You can make a cozy house. You can invite your friends over. You can have, you know, birthday parties. You can do all of these role-playing things that the community's been clamoring for in a space that's yours. But it's not just your space. You're in a larger context of a neighborhood. So it's me and you and you and you and you and you and you. And there are groups of friends, there are communities, there are guilds who are inhabiting a shared space. And they will be able to inhabit that space for years to come. You know, your progression, you know, on a tier right now is 6 months, something like that. Your progression in housing is forever if you want it to be. So it's super exciting when you think about the world, how we interact with it now and how we will interact with it in the near future. How does having a persistent space that players can call their home, how does it affect the way we build content?
Of course it does, absolutely. One of the most exciting things, in a designer sort of way, as opposed to a player sort of way maybe, but maybe not, is the potential to have quests give you rewards of things you can do for your house, things you can decorate your house with, things that are mementos of some achievement that you managed to pull off, some awesome thing you did. We talk a little bit about that Onyxia head and where we're going to put it, you know, exactly. It also gives us an opportunity to look at what might happen if we brought content to you. So you know, we are thinking a lot about opportunities here. Right now, the giddy designers, though, are very excited about decor because they have all sorts of ideas of cool things that could go into your house and be an awesome reward, and get you guys out there exploring the world.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but one of the first conversations we had, this was in the housing prototype V19 or something. We were talking about how to build content, and you gave me the example that I used to pitch repeatedly through all the exec meetings, which was, so right now if you go in WoW and you find a village and there's a merchant and he's like, oh no, my cattle have run off or something like that. You save their cattle, you come back and you say, goodbye, merchant. In housing, we now have the opportunity for that merchant to come by your house, and you say thank you for your things, and he goes on his way, and he comes back every day or every week, and then at some point he stops coming by. And you're like, huh, I wonder what happened to the merchant.
Death.
Yeah.
He's on the death list.
Yeah, he's on the whiteboard.
She killed Blanchie.
I know, right?
You know that.
The merchant was just down the street, and his cattle.
Okay.
The merchant's not dead. He's just down the street. And you say, oh, hey, merchant, I can help you now. And you bring back his cattle or whatever, and he starts his trek again. And that feels so much more alive. It feels so much more personal than just like, oh, later, POI, I'm glad we've had that conversation. And yeah, to the point with the designers, we had to have a brand new process for how other designers request decor. Because they've all been clamoring, hey, I'm doing a quest in this place. Can I get a whatever prop? And it's been a deluge, and so we're like, okay, we need a process for this now because there's a lot. And so yeah, we've been reinventing a lot of wheels right now for better.
Something else there's been a lot of is a desire to talk to the community as we're building out housing. And I just want to compliment you personally, you and the team. The housing team has been very open about wanting to share with the community what we're doing and what we might be able to do so that we can make sure that that community is heard and that they're receiving, so to speak, what they want out of housing. Tell me a little, just anything you can tell me.
2-minute version.
Okay, Midnight, The Last Titan, Beyond. Tell me something about what's coming for housing.
A lot of things are coming for housing.
Sure.
The first release that we have is just that. It's the first release for housing.
Yes.
We are going to be building on housing for the foreseeable future. We have a very, very bulky roadmap full of stuff. You know, the community response to it has been amazing in that, like, we'll make a post, and then we'll see this big discussion come up, and we'll be, like, plucking, like, we should think about adding that. That seems like a good idea. Put it on the roadmap. The team has, channels devoted to brainstorming and coming up with new stuff. There has been no shortage of amazing ideas that are all just, fighting each other to get on. So yeah, got a lot coming. You'll hear more over the next couple of weeks. I think we'll be talking about some other things that people want to hear about very soon too.
Regarding housing, there's a development anecdote I want to share with y'all, which is right now when you go to an innkeeper, you can bind your Hearthstone to there, and then that makes it so that you can return there whenever you want. Right now, if you go to an innkeeper in the game right now, any innkeeper in the world, it will say, make this in my home. And we had to change that in Midnight because that's not true anymore, because you'll have a home. Now it just says, bind my Hearthstone to this inn. I think that's kind of special.
It's lovely.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. That's nice. And I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank all of you for coming, and everyone watching online. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed your insights.
Thank you.
From the entire World of Warcraft development team, we cannot wait to see you in Azeroth and welcome you home.
Thank you, everybody.